trying to grade NFL draft picks is a lot like trying to grade lottery numbers. It really doesn't matter, and there are so many things that go into the success of a player, whether it's luck, fit, or just work ethic. But today I'm going to be trying to sort of talk about the winners and losers based off of my own grades of each of these prospects. It's, of course, there's a lot of things that can go on within an NFL draft room that makes a team make a choice that people don't really expect. But I don't think anybody really expected this first one, which is Michael Penix to the Atlanta Falcons. Baffling is kind of the only really thing I have to say about this pick. Of course, Penix has a lot of potential. I made a video about him earlier where he has a really good arm. Like, his arm talent is really there. The ball sort of jumps out of his hand, and he really has he can throw a beautiful deep ball. But there are so many inconsistencies with his game that I mentioned that he would be better despite being a 24-year-old sitting behind a quarterback for a year and really developing some more consistent mechanics both in the upper and lower body, and also just getting better at reading the field. And this obviously is not good when you are 24 years old. However, I did not expect him to go to a team that has a quarterback with 50 million guaranteed over the next 4 years, each one of those years being around 50 million, by the way, not total. I don't know what the Falcons are doing here. This is a lot less about the Penix at 8 pick, and it's a lot more about the fact that Michael Penix is likely not going to see the field as a established starter until he's 26 or 27 if things go well for Atlanta. The only way that Penix sees the field beforehand is if disaster strikes, and at that point you might be better off just not being very good and getting a younger talent. Again, I don't see the value here. Looking at who went after him, I mean, we have Roma Dunze. You even have you can get an offensive tackle and Fuunga, Byron Murphy. All of the edges were there. This has been a position that Atlanta has struggled with since Vic Beasley decided to regress in 2018. I do not see the vision here. I don't see how this pick is going to work out. And if it does, I think it's arguably worse for Atlanta. I think this is a pick that you look at and you're like, I don't want him to see the field. I want Kirk to be our quarterback. We're spending 50 million guaranteed per year on him. So then why make the pick? It's just baffling. I don't see the vision at all. Going into our first positive, to go to a much more positive note, the Bears did the thing that a lot of teams really struggle with, and they didn't overthink their picks. Of course, I'm not going to give them any credit for the Caleb Williams pick. That was entirely luck, the fact that Carolina made that deal with them and then proceeded to be the worst team in the league. They didn't really have to do a whole lot to get that, and I'm not going to give them credit for not screwing it up. But I think the second pick, looking at who was on the board and where they could have gone, taking the option of going with Roma Dunze and just saying, man, that would be really fun, I think is arguably the best pick they could have made. You have an argument for a Byron Murphy, especially with how the defense plays under Eberflus. But I really think that Rome is just an elite level player. I loved him coming out. I mean, for me, he was my 4th graded player overall. He was my 2nd wide receiver, but I will say I did like his tape more than Marv. I just out of a enjoyable to watch. Rome is probably my favorite player in this class. Not he's my number 1, but I am a Rome stan, and I will be tuning into Bears games just to watch this connection grow. I mean, I think you got to hand it to him of just not overthinking oh, well, maybe we can get more value. No, let's just go get 2 guys that are going to be difference makers for our team. Now, going back to the bad section, I've got to do it, man. Chop Robinson, Miami Dolphins.
Come here, you. It's raw. It's fucking raw.
I'm a Dolphins fan, for one, so there might be a little bias in this pick, and not in a good way. Coming out, Chop was a guy that I was not very high on. I had him in the 40s in my grades in terms of prospects. I see the vision. I understand where the potential is there. to me, it is very much like Chop needs to go to a situation with coaches that can teach him how to basically develop his bag overall, because otherwise he is going to get destroyed in the league. And I think that he's really going to struggle in his earlier snaps. Of course, I can't tell you what goes on over an off season in the NFL. He could become a really, really good player. But I just think like with who was on the board, with the needs that the Dolphins have, I mean, the offensive line has been sort of decimated year after year. You have nobody on the interior really that I would trust. I understand the appeal of, well, we've got to pay these edges. They're gonna like we're gonna lose some guys in the next couple of years. Let's get a guy who can sit behind some older sort of edge players that we can develop that could be really good. And I also understand that like his athletic grades are unmatched in terms of the explosive grades and the raw athletic grades. I mean, he's up there. The only two players that match him are Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. But I don't necessarily think that that's like, oh, he's the next Myles Garrett. There's a lot of work to be done here. And I think with especially with the gap that the Dolphins have, I mean, they don't, after their second pick, they don't pick for another like 100 selections. And it's like, I would much rather them have moved back and picked Chop later, or even if they miss out on Chop and he happens to be good, just giving more shots to be able to fill some roles. Because I don't think you're going to get a lot for that second. And now, if you trade out of that second with how this class is, you're really throwing darts at a dartboard in terms of offensive line, hoping that you hit something. So I think value-wise, and I think with how their class is overall and the amount of assets they have, I understand why they did it. I see the vision. I understand the explosiveness. I understand the disruption grades. I understand all that. And if it works out, like, it works out. I mean, again, like, these are just toolsy guys you got to develop, but there's just so much if there. This is a big swing to take whenever you don't have a lot of swing. Next up for my wins, a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to go to every single team that needed a cornerback in this class that took one. I don't know why the corners fell. I think that this class was really poorly stereotyped as a offensive heavy and defensive light class. I really like the top end talent defensively, and I do think there's a lot of depth later on. But I think corner was one of those positions where there were very clearly a few guys that were separated from the rest, and they did not go very high. I mean, I just think that you look at like Quinyon Mitchell going 22nd to the Eagles, and if you had told me that before the class, I would have been like, man, I guess, you know, a lot of guys really liked, you know, Terrion Arnold. They really liked, Nate Wiggins. They really liked Cooper DeJean more. No, he was the first one gone. And the fact that the first corner was taken at 22nd, to me, is just wild. Terrion Arnold to the Detroit Lions is an absolute steal of a pick. I think Nate Wiggins offers something interesting in Baltimore. He obviously has the highest ceiling of everybody, but I think that just the amount of talent that's still on the board. I mean, you still have Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I don't necessarily have a first-round grade on, but I can absolutely see him being a really, really good fit in certain schemes. Like I said, you've got Cooper DeJean, who I think a lot of people are sort of labeling as a safety, but, you know, he is the white Jackie Robinson. He's going to prove everybody that white boys can, in fact, ball. I think that there's talent here that is going to be tapped into in the second round as well. So congrats to every team that decided to take a corner, because you got some absolute value out of this class. Now going to my last sort of pick that I am not super high on. I've got to give it to the Broncos, man. What are we doing? What are we doing? Okay, I have to say, Bo Nix could be really good. And of course, like, development-wise and everything, like, he could be very good. These grades, once again, are all off of my individual grades I gave these players. I had Bo Nix as a fourth-round grade. Like, I genuinely thought that, like, he's a quarterback, so you usually take quarterbacks with lower grades higher because of positional need. Not 12. This is a guy who, when you look at his stats, when you watch him play, when you watch, like, his big games, you're like, okay, maybe there's something here. But when you really dig deep into what he had to do at Oregon, they gave him maybe the safest offense I've ever seen at any level, like ever. This is like my backup is in, and I just got to throw wide receiver screens every play. It was pretty ridiculous. I mean, like he of course broke the FBS record for completion percentage, but when 50% of your passes are screens, I would sure hope you would break that record if you are like an NFL prospect. I don't see how this is going to move the needle. I think this is just going to screw timelines up because then what if next year you have like a pick in a similar range and you're like, but we've got Knicks, man. We can't give up on him. I think you're just setting the timetable back. This team is going to suck next year. And I don't understand why you don't just go, oh, let's go BPA. Like we can get Brock Bowers. I mean, he's going to be a good option for whatever rookie we get in a year or two. Let's go Fuanga, who went 2 picks later, who I think is an absolute monster at tackle. Like that's a fantastic pick there. That'll give us something on to protect the quarterback that we get. Hell, let's go one of the edges because every single edge is available at this point. Let's get some defensive talent on the board. Again, I don't see the vision. I don't understand it. I think this is a panic move. This is I need to save my job move. I need to prolong my contract move. I need to be able to go into next year at the end of next year when we're 4-13 and look the owner in the eyes and say, well, I've got this guy I'm working on. He might be 25, but he's got potential. We just drafted him. Are you really going to make your rookie quarterback have 2 coaches in 2 years? That's the only thing I see. I think this is just a bad move. I don't think the value's there. I don't think this is going to work out. I think this is going to just push the Broncos into more and more and more just meh territory. Lastly, I'd like to go over some sort of picks I'm conflicted on. First off, I would like to go over the first 2 tackles that were taken with Joe Alt and J.C. Latham. When you look at like the Chargers situation, I think that they were in a really prime position to move down, but obviously that's easier said than done. This is not Madden. You're not guaranteed an offer. Joe Alt is an elite level player. I think a lot of fans are really upset because they wanted like Neighbors, they wanted a Dunze, which I understand. But Joe Alt is very, very likely, not certain, very likely to secure that left tackle position for the next 10 years for the Chargers. And left tackle is one of the premier positions in the league. It is very hard to draft. And you just got a guy who is like 6'9", 300 something, who is an elite level run blocker, which is something that Jim Harbaugh really covets. He has a lot of potential as a pass blocker. Of course, you've got to make sure he stays low because he is 6'9". It's really easy to get under guys like that. But I think that with the potential he has and what he showed at Notre Dame and the lack of sort of pressures he allowed, this is a guy who I think is going to be an elite level tackle. And I think that if you just say like at the beginning of the offseason at 5 or take an elite level tackle, you're fine with it. Of course, losing Keenan with the way the offense is looking right now, there's not a lot of weapons, but you still have a whole draft ahead of you. I'm sure that they'll be able to pick some guys that they're confident in. And I think that they're really securing this team and building this team from the ground up, and that starts with the trenches. The Titans took a swing with J.C. Latham. I think that there's a lot of potential here. JC is a really underrated pass blocker. I think when you look at these sort of guys that are these really big, physical, athletic guys, you think like, oh, they're a mauler in the run game, but they can't pass block. I think JC is sort of the opposite, not like fully, like I don't think he can't run block, but I think he's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. He's really good at dropping his weight and getting low and using his really big arms and big hands to just like move guys out of the way in the pass game, which is something that you really want to see. To me, though, I thought that there were better tackles in this class. I mean, I am a Fuanga stan. He was arguably my tackle 1, and him going at 14, I think for the Saints is a great pick. But I've talked about that as well in this class. I might as well just throw it up there. Fuanga, 14, another great pick. But I think like this is an interesting swing because I don't necessarily think that the difference between tackle 2 and tackle 4 is that great. And I don't know if they tried to move down, if maybe this was their guy they wanted. I just think with both of these tackle picks, it's like I like the player, don't like the value, if that makes sense, which is weird because it's like it's a left tackle. That's a very valuable position, but just how the teams are built, I don't think the Titans are going to be that good next year anyways. So I just think that like it just kind of, maybe it's boring, I guess is a good way to say it. Next, I'd like to go to Leatu Latu at 15. I love Latu's tape. I want to say that. I love Latu's tape. Don't disagree. He's a great player. But, man, is he going to be able to play more than 4 or 5 years? Like, the injury concerns are real. It's neck concerns. It's like, you don't draft a guy if you're like, oh, I don't know if he's going to play. So, like, maybe there's nothing really there. But you see guys like Leighton Vander Esch that have very similar injuries. And, you get 2-3 years of elite production, and then he's gone. And it's like, in my head, if I'm taking a guy at 15th overall, I'm guaranteeing a fifth round or fifth year option on him. I want more than that, right? I want the potential of more than that. And I think it's not like Dallas Turner or Jared Verse were off the board. This was their edge one. I think that there's more opportunities there for you to get more value out of those picks versus, there is a lot of concerns with Latu. Again, the tape's phenomenal. The technique is phenomenal. I think he's going to make an instant impact for this team, but this is not a win now situation for the Colts. They're likely not going to. I think that they have potential to make the playoffs. I think that they can make a lot of noise. I don't think this is a Super Bowl bound team. And I think for you to say like, oh, well, we're going to get a guy who there's a very real chance that we have 2 to 3 years to really capitalize on this guy before we're going to see some heavy injury regression. I think it's a big swing. It's a big risk. And I don't think you really needed to take that risk at that pick. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the receivers at the back end with everybody else who was available. The Chiefs I think they looked in the war room and they said, well, man run fast, quarterback throw ball far, big play. And that's about it. It's fun. It's a fun pick. Worthy's a fun player. He broke out his freshman year, which is usually a good sign for receivers in the league, but I think that there are better players on the board. I had a really high grade on A.D. Mitchell, so like, of course, I'm going to be kind of iffy about the rest of these picks, but it's fun. It has a lot of potential. Don't necessarily know how well it fits the offensive scheme that they run. It could be a really good pick. I also just see this being a lot, like, I don't think this is like Sky Moore territory because I think Worthy is a lot better than Sky Moore, but I see this as like people are going to expect something different than what they're getting out of Worthy, where I think Worthy is going to be used a lot more to spread the defense out and make them play deeper and not allow them to get shallow because they have to respect his speed, versus people are expecting like, oh, well, we're going to get a 50-yard bomb to Worthy every game that's going to, go for 6. He's going to be like one of the best players of all time because he runs a 4.21 and we have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. I don't necessarily think that is realistic. I don't think that's how they're going to use him. I just think picking that at 28 is kind of like, But it is funny that they traded with Buffalo. It's just funny. Looking at the 49ers, Ricky Pearsall, I think, is a guy that not a lot of people really know about. He didn't really get a lot of buzz in this class, like mainstream-wise, because the Florida team he was on was not very good, and he didn't play with amazing quarterbacks. I think you can even say like Anthony Richardson, when he was at Florida, was not a very polished passer. And I don't necessarily think that Pearsall was polished as a receiver last year either, but I guess 2 years ago. This last season, though, I think he really showcased his full skill set. And I think for the 49ers fans out there, this is a player that you are going to get who can kind of fit any role. You look at, like, there's a sort of the joke of like third and Jawan, because Jawan Jennings would just essentially he was the go-to guy on third downs, and he could get you the third down because he can fit many roles as a player. Ricky Pearsall to me is Jawan Jennings with like a second round talent grade instead of a fourth. To me, I think he's a guy who, I don't want to just sit here and say he's a possession guy because of course they're built very different. He's going to be a go-to guy for this offense, in my opinion. I think that whenever you need some yards, whenever you're like, man, we got to get this, we got to get past the sticks on this one, I think the first read is going to be Ricky, because I think he's a guy who, he's got really strong hands at the catch point. He knows what he needs to do. And especially, I think, against zone coverage, which you're going to see a lot on these 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations, I think he has a really good eye for seeing the soft spots in the zone and being able to adjust his route to be able to give the quarterback a really easy completion. I think he's really smart, and he knows where he needs to be on just about every play. He very rarely makes the wrong decision. And I also think, like, with the ball in his hands, he is, I think a lot of people just see him as a possession guy. He's really good after the catch. I mean, like, he's just very smooth with everything he does, with his route running, with his ball carrying. He's just smooth. Like, there's no wasted movement. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan for every play. He has a plan for how he's going to attack and press the corner. He has a plan for how he's going to pressure the defense. And he has a plan after he gets the ball of where he wants to be. So I think this could wind up being a very good pick. I don't necessarily think the ceiling is as high with other guys on the board, though, which is why I sort of have him in this sort of position. But I think he very well could be a 60 to 70 reception receiver at some point in his rookie contract. And lastly, Xavier Legette. Kind of a fun pick because it's South Carolina guy. I don't know how, like, super high I am on Xavier Legette. I think that, of course, he could become something. Carolina's been really bad about developing receivers. Of course, completely different staff. Legette needs a lot of work. He's nowhere near a polished player. I think you can absolutely get a guy who can be a very successful receiver, though. I mean, of course, the talent's there. The size is there. To me, though, when I looked at the situation Carolina was in, I thought they need to get a guy who can get easy completions, who can allow Bryce Young to get the ball out and allow him to be able to have a consistent option like he had with Adam Thielen. It was either that or you needed a guy who could space the field, who could really threat with his speed. And even though I didn't have the highest grade on him, Troy Franklin here I think would have made more sense. And then in terms of allowing easy completions, Malachi Corley is on the board, who I do have a really high grade on. Vlad McConkey is on the board. And if you just want a guy who you think has high potential, E.D. Mitchell's on the board. I just think with who's there, I don't have the highest grade on Legette in terms of everybody else. So, like, I think that this is a bit of a reach. But I do see the vision. I do understand that Carolina just, I think they almost can't go wrong with who they pick just because of how bad the team is. They have to be better than whoever they select. So, yeah, that's about it. I'm excited to see the Falcons select Spencer Rattler at 43. And I really, I can't wait to see what tomfoolery occurs in this second round and for the rest of the draft. So, yeah, thank you.